Hello everybody, Shinjo here, welcome back to the channel, and at the moment, Go Rush, the latest Yu-Gi-Oh! And at the moment, the last Yu-Gi-Oh! Is officially done, at least in the Japanese version. I know that the Chronicles is going to be coming out, but that's not a traditional Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, and since I've discussed a review for every single one up to this point, I figured it would be a good opportunity to discuss Go Rush as well, whether you're keeping up with the dub or you're in the middle of watching the sub. Regardless, I mean, obviously if you're in the middle of the show, you shouldn't be watching this review because there are going to be spoilers. But either way, Go Rush is certainly an interesting show. And I'm just going to have the three posters rotating between each other because I do like all three of the posters in their own right. Obviously, there are some funny things that I can think of with these posters, mainly from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything's channel. But as far as the show, the positives, first of all, there are a lot of good characters that I enjoy. Just naming off the top of my head, Yuhi, Shinjo, Gohayuna, even Udius at the end of the show, I will say, are really enjoyable. And honestly, even characters like Yuhi, Shinjo, and Epoch to an extent, they had one perspective for me and it changed by the end of the show. Whether that's good or not, it depends on the character. I will say overall for Yuhi and Epoch, it changed to a positive spin because they were kind of annoying at the early part of the show. But Shinjo kind of took an opposite turn where he started off really cool. And I don't know what they did with him by the end of the show. But either way, he still is kind of neat. It's just that there's, let's just say, something about him that is weird. And if you got that reference, congratulations. And while I personally didn't enjoy it, they did wrap up the Otis plotline in a satisfying way. While I would have hoped that they would have done it a little bit differently, like even though it's really predictable to have it be Yuga from the future or something like that, I would have preferred that to what we got because it was more abstract and I didn't really like that. But at the same time, they did wrap it up in a way that made sense. And on the note of Yuga, even though he was a huge part of the show in the first part of it, it never really felt to the point that it was super overwhelming, that it was just all Yuga all the time. Although in saying all that, with especially Yuga being involved, there are a lot of things in the show that you get more enjoyment and mileage out of if you've watched Sevens before. Because for the people that just went right into Go Rush without watching Sevens, there's going to be a lot of stuff, especially involving Yuga, about all the mechanics, about these characters, these lookalikes, as it were, that the plot lines are really unfamiliar to people that haven't watched Sevens. Although for me, that's seen every Yu-Gi-Oh!, none of that stuff really bothered me. But for the people that haven't seen Sevens, it doesn't really hold much water. And on that note is a good transition into the negatives about the show. And I feel like I say this with every Yu-Gi-Oh! There's a lot of filler early on. Like for example, my older brother is watching through Go Rush right now. And I'm just thinking about all the filler he's going to have to get through in the early part of the show. Even clip shows, because like the episode where Udius is learning all the types, quite literally filler. Although you could make the case that some filler is enjoyable, it is kind of weird because I feel like Sevens and Go Rush are one of the few that have a lot of filler where there's not even a duel involved. Because even in Duel Monsters, for example, there is filler there, but the episode where Taya and Yugi go on that date, Yugi does duel Johnny Steps. A one-off character, but it's still a duel. I can't think of many episodes in other Yu-Gi-Ohs that are just straight up filler without a duel involved. And that's kind of an interesting thing for Go Rush, whether it's good or bad, Depends on how it moves the plot along. Because if I remember correctly, there were some episodes from Sevens that were not dubbed at all. I think the one where they were in the restaurant and the girl kept eating the food, I think that one wasn't dubbed, although I'm not sure. But I know there were some episodes from Sevens that weren't dubbed, probably because there wasn't any plot relevance. And that's interesting because on the one hand, you can make the case that if they're interesting enough characters and fun enough characters, it doesn't really matter if a duel's involved. But at the same time, with a show like Yu-Gi-Oh!, you kind of have to have a duel involved. And while I'm not going to go into specific details on every single arc, overall I think a lot of them were really fun. Especially the first arc and the arc leading up to Season 1's finale with Shinjo involved in both of them. Those are really fun. I'm not sure how I feel about the Phaser Brothers arc. That one's a certainly interesting one. But just for the fact that it kicks off Season 2, it already gets some bonus points for me. But at the same time, I don't really look back fondly on the Kawaii Duel Spacetime arc. Kawaii Duel himself as a character is fun, but the arc is kind of dragging because there were a lot of episodes where it's just in the space-time and these two characters duel. It's to the point where I really don't remember much of what happens in that arc. And that's not a good sign if you don't remember what happens. And I mentioned about Udius earlier. He certainly did get better as a character in the second half for me. But in the first half, the fact that he's so gullible is a bit too much at times for me. I'm just thinking back to, I don't remember what the specific details were, where Yuhi ended up dueling Zion, and it's just Udius screaming on the sidelines because he's in the massage chair. Again, a nice little reference to Sevens, but it's just one of those things where Udius is sort of being turned into a joke, but his second half part of the show makes up for it, in my opinion. But on that note, I mentioned the Sevens lookalikes before. They are much less important in the show. I really like a lot of them, and even for ones that on the surface level don't seem like they're the lookalikes. For example, Epoch to Tiger, apparently they are. But then you get the more obvious ones like Zion to Nail, Luke to Luke, Asaka to Asana. I don't remember which ones from which show because the names are really similar, but they are certainly much less important, especially the ones that work at UTS. They are just irrelevant for most of the show. But then you get characters like Manabu, and I think it's pretty clear that the writers don't seem like they really like Manabu that much. I mean, he was really good at the start of the show, especially with his duel against Udius. He's a nice comic relief sort of character, but they just turned him into a punching bag in the second half of the show, and I don't necessarily know why. I mean, it kind of makes sense because it's a nice little nod to when Gakuto was dueling Nail in the tournament, where it just breaks down and starts acting like a fool. But it never got to the point where Manabu was a complete joke, because I know that Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything mentioned this in one of his recent live streams, I think it was, that it got to the point where Manabu says, "Oh, I see, they did this because X, Y, and Z, and yes, I'm really smart." No, that's not at all why it happens, Manabu. Just be quiet. It just felt like they took any chance that they could to throw a pot shot at Manabu. And I don't know why, because I really like his deck. His deck of fire is really cool, but... And then you got Gakugen at the end of the show. That is just the icing on top of the crap cake, in my opinion. But I don't know. Manabu's turn never really got that bad until his first duel against Shinjo. So, I don't know. At the same time, he's a really neat character, and he's honestly the most relevant Sevens lookalike that's super obviously a Sevens lookalike. But it just felt like they took any opportunity they could to have Manabu be a punching bag. And I don't know how I feel about that. But overall, I would say outside of the characters that I've mentioned, otherwise the characters are just okay for me. Like Mitsuko, Dinwa, even Yuumu, who certainly had an interesting part in the show. They're just kind of neutral for me. Didn't really love them, didn't really hate them. It's just that for a lot of them, and I hate to wrap Yuumu in this with characters like Mitsuko and Dinwa and even London, that they just kind of feel irrelevant. And that's not good when Yuumu is supposed to be part of the main three. But she was just irrelevant in part of the show that it just feels really upsetting because I like Yumu's character at the start, but then they just started making Yuhi more relevant and Yuumu more irrelevant. And I am not entirely sure why they did that, but it kind of makes up for it with the Dark Meister and everything. But I don't know. At the same time, I do think that the increased stakes in this arc and this show in general compared to Seven's means that I like it more than Seven's, but I'm not entirely sure how much. And I'm not necessarily doing this on purpose because Seven's is the 7th show and Go Rush is the 8th show. But I think out of a score of 10, then that's probably my ranking for these two shows. Seven's is probably a 7 out of 10, and then an 8 out of 10 for Go Rush. I really enjoy Go Rush. There are certainly some speed bumps in the show, but overall I did enjoy it. And I'm interested to see what you guys think about the show, if you've seen it, obviously. But if you enjoyed this review, leave it down in the comment section below. I do plan on making a video as well on duels that we wish we've seen, because obviously I did that for every other show. But I'm going to wait a bit, mainly because I don't want to rush into the video, pun intended. But also, I know that there's not going to be any Yu-Gi-Oh! Confirmed at the moment, so I kind of want to take my time and really think it through. But I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't. If you have any thoughts on Go Rush, leave them down in the comment section. And if you have a favorite character of the show, let me know that. I think my favorite character from the group that we have, I feel like it's a bit too polarizing to say characters like Epoch or Goha Yuna, because they certainly had interesting arcs in the show. I think my favorite, even with the rough arc that he had and the rough showing in the second half, I do still think I really like Shinjo. He is really cool and I love the cards he uses. And that's weird because I feel like this is one of the few instances where I prefer the rival to the main character. But, oh well. I'll see you next time. Momentai.